All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from the snowy studios of Relmar McConnell Media Company here in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And we're about 30 minutes away from Buffalo, New York, where they were lambasted with over 6 feet of snow in the last 24 hours. And it's not over yet because there's another lake effect squall that's going to be lambasting them again. My good heavens. As I was talking to our next guest, whose name is Evan Pedone, we're going to send him down some snow so the people at the Florida Paranormal Society will have some for Christmas. And Evan, welcome to the X Zone, my friend. How are things in Florida?
Thank you. They're great down here in Florida. Rob, I want to thank you for having me on your show. It's a privilege, and I look forward to a good talk with you.
Well, it's our great pleasure. We have a lot of good friends in Florida. WPGS 840 in Titusville was one of our first stations when we started with the network. Ed Shiflett down there and all the crew. And, of course, whenever we go on a wonderful Princess cruise, we always go down to Fort Lauderdale and take the cruise and just enjoy the beautiful Florida sun for at least 10 days. So our heart is down in Florida. Now, tell me about the Florida Paranormal Society, Evan.
Sure. The Florida Paranormal Society, I founded it actually with my wife. And we are gurus into the paranormal. My novels and my background, I've been studying the paranormal now for about 15 years. And my wife, her degree was in investigative journalism, so we decided to form a society here in Florida that would focus on different genres of the paranormal, such as cryptozoology, lost cities, ghosts and entities, extraterrestrial life, things of that nature. And there really wasn't anything like that here in the state of Florida, so we decided to, you know what, since there isn't one, let's go ahead and start one up.
Wow, fantastic. So you basically, or I should say you and the other members of the Florida Paranormal Society, are like the place to go when it comes to investigating the paranormal from A to Z.
That's correct. And that's what we're aiming to be. Our society's been growing leaps and bounds. And we do partner with other societies. So we're not... We try to be all-inclusive, and we try to recognize the past successes of organizations that are bigger than ours,
right?
To work with them, because we're all looking for the truth. And recently, the Florida Paranormal Society has worked with the BFRO, the Bigfoot Research Organization. We actually performed an expedition about a week or so ago in the Neacka River State Park, and found what we believe, or potentially to believe, to be Bigfoot or primate hair. And we actually sent it off to the BFRO to go ahead and do further analysis.
What is Bigfoot? Is Bigfoot actually a myth? There are many people who say, all right, Bigfoot, there's no proof, so how can it be real? Maybe it's just a myth. Other people are saying, well, what it is actually a sighting of those people who give up society and live in the forests and are very elusive. And yet there's other people who say, well, Bigfoot is real. We just haven't been able to identify what Bigfoot is at this time.
Yep, and that's kind of that's definitely the boat that I fall in terms of my belief. I believe that Bigfoot, or down here in Florida, they actually call it the skunk ape, which is a subspecies of Bigfoot,
right?
Kind of like the Yeti in Nepal. what we believe, or what I believe the Bigfoot to be is a primate, and that is very, very elusive. And actually, in my novel Expedition Everest, I went in depth on the scientific attributes that, or the physical characteristics that this creature would have that would be able to avoid detection. And I made a case, I guess you could say, the case for Bigfoot,
Right.
Of how it would be able to avoid detection. For example, like its hair could be that of a polar bear's hair, very similar, where a polar bear won't show up on thermal cams. And therefore, when you ever watch a show like Finding Bigfoot,
Right.
they're always using an infrared camera or a thermal cam. And my theory is the reason why they're not able to detect a Bigfoot using that kind of equipment is because their hair insulates it and protects them from the environment, and therefore it's not picked up.
Evan, stand by. That makes a lot of sense. And Exonation, we're going to hear a lot more from Evan this hour. We're talking about the paranormal. Evan is the gentleman responsible for the Florida Paranormal Society. Their website is floridaparanormalsociety.com. And Evan and I will be back on the other side of this 2-minute break. Don't go away.
I'm Rob McConnell, and welcome to the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Today on the X Zone, do vampires really exist? Do vampires really exist? In creating Dracula, Irish author Bram Stoker, who lived from 1847 to 1912, may have drawn on stories he heard as a child about the cholera epidemic that hit London and Paris in 1849. As in times of plague, there were many cases of hasty burial of sick bodies which were not really dead but in a deep sleep or coma. Stoker's idea about vampires could have been fueled by reports of these so-called dead tapping on their coffins, turning in their graves, or showing other signs of life.
Welcome back, everyone. Evan Pedone is our special guest this hour. He's with the Florida Paranormal Society. They're based in Tampa, Florida, and is a leading research society, especially in all facets of the paranormal, including cryptids, lost cities, apparitions, myth, legends, treasure, and the unknown. Led by cryptozoologist Evan Pedone, he conducts expeditions and records them in a documentary-style format. He's the author of Expedition Everest, and he leads his team throughout Florida paranormal hotspots in a quest to discover the truth about many paranormal reports. www.floridaparanormalsociety.com is their website, and welcome back, Evan. It's great talking to you. All right, so why is Bigfoot called a skunk ape in Florida, Yeti and Sasquatch in the West, or are they all offshoots of a species that has yet to been discovered and accepted by the scientific community?
Well, the reason why they call it a skunk ape here in Florida is because it supposedly has a distinct smell. When you come upon it, it smells like a skunk. And there's different theories on why it has that smell. If you've been to Florida, I don't know how much time you've actually spent out in the swamp, but in the swamp we have sulfur deposits, or you can have a strong sulfur smell,
right?
Especially from the natural spring. And it makes sense that this animal, this primate, would obviously spend a lot of time in the swamp and therefore pick up these types of smells. Even like, the Fountain of Youth is believed to reside in Florida. At least I don't know if you believe in the Ponce de Leon legends or have studied it a whole lot. But if you go to St. Augustine is the tourist destination, I guess you could say, for the Fountain of Youth. And if you actually go to that spring there, the water has a distinct sulfur egg smell. Yeah. And so therefore, skunk ape.
Gotcha.
Now, when it comes to these different subspecies around the world and the different names that are attributed to them, whether it's Sasquatch or Yeti, these are just the different cultures and locales giving a name to a creature that, when described, matches up. And the interesting thing that I find about that is that you actually have cultures around the world that give a very similar description of a hominid, of an ancient hominid that's extremely large, that has strong physical characteristics that are very similar. And if anything, what I think that does is it further validates the Bigfoot phenomenon, because you're not having just an isolated event like a Jersey Devil or a Mothman, which is much more geographically localized. I mean, there are some events around the world where I guess you could say that those creatures could have possibly have a subspecies or something similar in different locales in Europe and as well as the United States, but nothing quite to the extent of Bigfoot. Bigfoot has different cultures from around the world that have been able to go ahead and describe a similar primate, and I think that validates it. And when you actually look at the expansiveness, see, a lot of times people go, well, shouldn't we have seen it by now? Shouldn't we have this thing on camera?
Well, that makes a lot of sense, that question.
Yep, and that's it. And the thing is, what people forget is they forget how much wilderness is out there. Because if you actually, I don't know if you've heard of the Western, well, I'm sure you've heard of it, the Western lowland gorilla.
Yeah.
And in 2008, this is one of the cases I put in my novel, Expedition Everest, they thought that the Western lowland gorilla populations were dwindling in the sub-50,000 range in 2008. They thought that the populations have dropped tremendously and that these things were going to be, 50,000 in the world, in the entire world. And they thought that these things were going to be on their way to extinction. Well, an expedition was led into the Congo in 2008, and they discovered 125,000 of them. Okay? So how does 125,000 primates get discovered, and where we thought this gorilla was on its way out towards extinction, we do an expedition into the Congo and we discover 125,000 of them. Now, if you're going to look at the vast expanses of Canada, for example, the population density, you have a country that is immense. It is larger than the United States. So for, it's almost 10 million kilometers in size, and you have a population of the size of the state of California that reside there. So imagine basically the population, the state of California being populated and the rest of the United States being barren land, woods, and no population whatsoever. Well, then it becomes very easy to see how a Sasquatch could reside in Canada and go undetected, because you have a huge swath of land that is largely untracked and, quite frankly, is unexplored. And if you were to look at Russia, another very, very large country. Mother Russia's huge. Let's give them their props.
Oh, she is. Yep.
You have a country that is just gigantic, yet has a population that is half of that of the United States. So once again, you're talking about a country. Imagine, the United States with half the population, and all of Canada being uninhabited. So it becomes, drawing comparisons between population and square mileage. So you can really easily see how a small number of these animals, whether it's 1,000, 2,000, maybe even 5,000, could theoretically go undetected, especially if they have adapted evolutionarily. So if my theory is that they've adapted through evolution to be the perfect, to be in perfect harmony with nature. So their fur insulates them, which would also make it difficult to discover through thermal imaging. Their hair, maybe they have some kind of active camouflage. Believe it or not, there are mammals that have camouflage, whether it's a changing of their fur to mimic their environment, like the ermine, or maybe even something where it's seasonal, like an Arctic fox. But there are these abilities to where it can camouflage itself.
Let me ask you something. What about the Roger Patterson film of Bigfoot? What is your opinion of that footage?
It's a love-hate relationship, to be honest with you. You know, I love it because of the attention that it draws to Bigfoot.
Sure.
What I would love when it comes under a microscope, when you really analyze that film, there are anomalies that would say, "Hey, this is real," because you see certain things like where the mouth opens, which is very interesting. You see muscle movement, which would be hard to go ahead and replicate that at a time frame. They're adamant that it is legitimate. The couple of problems that I have with it, though, is that it's just not enough. It's not 100% clear, obviously, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's a very frustrating piece because me personally is that I have to believe I have to have more. I want more than what that film gives me. But at the same time, they have analyzed the film, and it actually turns out to be a female Bigfoot. I don't know if you've seen that data.
Yeah,
they
I
look
have.
at the female Bigfoot because when they actually look at it under a microscope and they really analyze the footage, you can actually see female attributes on the Bigfoot. So it really becomes, well, wow, who would make a female Bigfoot, 40, 50 years ago? And who would add this muscle tone and these muscle movements on this creature? And the fact that the mouth opens. So, I mean, it's pretty in-depth, and it's pretty in depth for that time frame. But like I said, it's a very frustrating piece because I want more.
Sure. Loch Ness Monster. Like other aspects of the paranormal, in the news 1 minute, not in the news for weeks, months, maybe years. Bigfoot, the same thing. Loch Ness Monsters. Nessie. What is Nessie? Is she actually a misidentified creature?
I don't believe so. I believe that Nessie is a plesiosaur or something along those lines. Probably migrates and has some kind of migratory pattern where, I mean, let's face it, Loch Ness is very deep. It's very murky.
Yeah.
I go on the water all the time and I never see a shark. Very rarely do I ever see a shark, and I've never seen a great white or a tiger shark, and I've been on the water my whole life. So especially when it comes to sea creatures or animals or cryptids in the sea, you have an extremely immense area. I mean, we cannot find an airplane that unfortunately crashed.
Malaysian Airlines
the crash that
370,
happened with Malaysian Airlines. So with our state-of-the-art technology, we can't find an airplane in the ocean.
Listen, you and I have to take our news break. Please stand by, Evan. Great having you with us. Exonation, Evan Pedone is our special guest. He is the founder of the Florida Paranormal Society. They're based in Tampa, Florida. Their website is www.floridaparanormalsociety.com. And Evan and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, Exonation, you can listen to the X Zone 7/24/365 at xzoneradiotv.com.
I'm Rob McConnell, and welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Today on the X Zone, the Great Lakes Triangle of North America. Found in the heartland of North America, these landlocked yet connected lakes, which eventually empty into the Atlantic Ocean, have become the scene of more mysteries involving ships, aircraft, people, UFOs, ghosts, and phantom ships than the Bermuda Triangle. 1/16th the size of the Bermuda Triangle, Lady John Graves Simcoe was the first European to chronicle the strange orbs of life that have been seen above and below the waters of Lake Ontario. First Canadians tell of great cities which surrounded the Great Lakes where men flew without wings. The Great Lakes Triangle of North America, one of the world's greatest mysteries, right in our own backyard.
One 1-800-610-7035, worldwide toll-free. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV, and our main website where you can listen to the show 7/24/365, as well as get the latest news from the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology. www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour, X-Zone Nation, is Ed Pedone. He is with the Florida Paranormal Society. They're based in Tampa, Florida. Their website is www.floridaparanormalsociety.com. And let me see, they're also available on Facebook at florida.paranormal.society. And Ed is the author of Expedition Everest, which is available on Amazon.com. How about UFOs? What kind of investigations has the Florida Paranormal Society done when it comes to those strange lights in the sky?
Well, as you know, in Florida is a hotspot for paranormal activity. What we do is when we do our expeditions, we try to go to locations where there have been recent sightings and do investigative work. Recently, we traveled down to Cape Coral and done some general expeditions down there, especially when there was a lot of sightings relatively recently that were reported through MUFON. So, but it's interesting because the UFO phenomenon is still very, very taboo. I think people will be more prone to go ahead and actually report a Bigfoot sighting or a Loch Ness Monster sighting than they would saying that they saw a UFO and little green men from Mars.
Yeah, but I can understand the skepticism of the public, as well as the ever-increasing skepticism with mainstream media, because you've got people from different organizations that are saying, well, there was a UFO over the city of Miami that was the size of 3 football fields, but nobody saw it because it was invisible.
Yeah, and I don't think that helps out paranormal investigators or the cause for people that maybe want the truth or the perceived truth behind the UFO phenomenon.
Right.
And, there's a couple things here because my background, I was in the Air Force and I was in aerospace. I was in aerospace propulsion, and so I'm very familiar with what our aircraft in the United States military can do. When I was actually in the Air Force, though, I became associated with a couple people that claims to have seen technology that was rather impressive. Actually, one tech sergeant that I knew claimed to have actually worked on aircraft that were alien aircraft, which was rather peculiar to me. And then I had another person when I was actually down at Nellis Air Force Base. Now, if you're not familiar with Nellis Air Force Base, viewers, Nellis Air Force Base manages Area 51, and I was really, really excited to go down there actually for this course. And the course that I was studying was for aerospace propulsion units on the F-15 and F-16 fighter jets. So I go down to Nellis for a follow-up course. And when I'm in the course, an airman, I couldn't help myself. I had to ask, because when I was checking into my hotel, there was a retired military guy who was doing an investigation on Area 51, so I thought, what the heck?
Sure.
Let me ask. I go, have you seen anything, out of the ordinary, and we're in our training class, and there's only 4 of us. And it was a small class. And he goes, Evan, I'm going to tell you what I saw, and I was going to tell you what I was told. And he saw an aircraft that moved entirely silent, that was an actual aircraft that you would describe as a UFO, as the typical triangular. It was a craft that made no sound but a light hum that came over the base and took off very, very rapidly, once again making no sound. And he asked his shop chief about it.
Yeah.
And his shop chief told him just to forget what he saw, that it was our aircraft, and there's nothing more to it.
So,
Okay.
Are you saying then that a lot of these UFO sightings that people are mistaking for extraterrestrial are really our own craft that have yet to be publicized?
There's no doubt about that. That's the United States Air Force, United States military. I'm not talking about the F-22s or the F-35.
Right.
I'm talking about the stuff that you don't ever get to see or hear about. It's much farther advanced than any other country's aircraft, military, without a doubt. I wrote another novel, a political thriller called Assassin's Mace. And in Assassin's Mace, I actually kind of I lightly delve into our top secret program. And, I don't want to get off the paranormal topic, but I talked about our top secret programs and the capabilities of our aircraft in that. And once again, this is fiction. This is not like I'm giving, I have privileged knowledge to a top secret aircraft and I'm giving you the specs on it. But the point that I'm making is that a lot of these sightings are, in fact, without a doubt, United States military aircraft that are able to do amazing things, is my belief. However, the question has to be asked, where did this technology come from? Because the technology is so advanced, it is not in the normal realm of our scientific capability, our scientific understanding.
Maybe not the broad knowledge of the scientific community and the scientific knowledge, but is it possible that there are groups of scientists who are developing specific projects that to anyone else but this selected group would be totally unbelievable that our scientists from this planet could actually develop this scientific or this type of craft, this type of propulsion system, that it has to be extraterrestrial? Is it possible?
Well, it's possible, but I would say it's highly unlikely.
Why?
And what I would use is the advancements that have been made. If you look at history, when it comes to the history of flight, and you look at the Wright brothers up until the 1920s and even to the 1930s, even in World War II, I mean, we were propeller-driven aircraft.
Yeah, except towards the end, towards the end of the war when the jet engine came into play.
Well, when the Germans were really making leaps and bounds, improvements in that field. Now, what was very interesting, though, what is very, very interesting is in 1947, when the Roswell crash happened, okay? And a lot of things happened at that time frame that was very, very interesting. For one, you had the Army Air Corps switch over to an Air Force, number one. And then the technology improvements after that event, if you actually look at the technology improvements when that event supposedly happened, and some of the transitions that happened in that time frame, in 20 years we landed on the moon. So,
you're saying we landed on the moon, but the Russians beat us to the moon.
Well,
So how do we justify that statement? Because the Russians landed a robotic craft on the moon in 1959.
That is true. That is true. One of the things that I find, you also have to understand that there's a lot of espionage going on at that time. It wasn't like the United States intel community, the United States military, it wasn't under lock and key. I mean, we know that the Russians were able to get our information for our atomic weapons and so forth. It's possible that they, when it comes to this space race, it's quite possible that they could have gotten access to some of our technology. Well,
or the Americans got a hold of the Russian technology.
Well, now that's a conspiracy theory, but I guess it's possible. Sure.
Why not?
I mean, the Russian technology, but the Russian technology was far inferior. Actually, I mean, they actually got a head start.
But how can you say it was inferior when they had the first satellite in orbit, they had the first man in orbit, they had the first craft on the moon way before America? So how can you say their technology was inferior?
Well, I'm talking about, that's a great argument, actually. When you're looking at the space race, they jumped out ahead. But I would be careful to put technology in the terms of just the space race and not in terms of the microprocessor and computer advancements. So, if we're talking just in one field, sure, they got a head start on us. But if you're talking about, developing the nuclear weapon, the atomic weapon, and going into the microprocessors in the computer age, I really don't think there's a comparison. I think that the United States, by far and large.
Well, maybe at one time I would have agreed with you, but now with China, Japan, and India having satellites orbiting the moon that are actually doing surveys to mine and to bring back to Earth helium-3, and you've got the United States actually doing very little when it comes to this. I think at one time the United States, because of a PR push by President Kennedy, was ahead. And don't forget, it wasn't the Americans that developed the rocket power. It was the Germans. Von Braun was brought over. So, I look at the whole picture. I just don't look at certain little slices and base my entire hypothesis on that. Instead of going to Mars, that no one else is going to, for many good reasons, why isn't America up on the moon trying to bring back helium-3 and solving the energy crisis? Why?
Well, who says we're not?
Well, hey, listen. If we know that the Japanese, the Chinese, and India are up there, believe me, the other countries would be very quick to say that America was up there as well. The American space program in no specific area is doing anything like that, and that's easy to find, that's easy to confirm, that's easy to follow.
And I'm going to actually disagree with you on this, and here's why. What we're referring to, is knowledge that is largely available versus what you don't know, what the United States military is performing. What I can say is that the United States Space Command and those entities are I would say, from my insight, are not taking a back seat to any of these other countries.
Well, maybe in strategic arms, I agree. But if the United States was doing so great in the space race or the space exploration, why is the public sector getting involved? Because the government isn't doing as much as it should be.
Well, the private sector is a necessary development. I mean, you have to support your private sector, and I think that there's a lot of industries to be had from the private sector getting involved in the space race. I think that the private sector has proven in a lot of different ways that it can be superior to government in terms of certain industries.
Mm-hmm.
On the same note, it's also best to not exclude the private sector and look at them more as a partner when it comes to space in that industry. I mean, regardless, I mean, if you look at even companies like Lockheed Martin or Boeing,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are private sector companies that are partnered with the United States government and Skunk Works, for example, of Lockheed Martin, to develop amazing technology that
Right.
that is quite frankly astonishing. So by working in harmony with both the private sector and the government,
Mm-hmm.
can work in harmony to reach a common goal.
But
when it
wouldn't
comes to what China is
Yeah.
doing and what Russia is doing,
and India is doing, and Japan is doing.
but that doesn't mean that we haven't. That does not mean, you got to bear in mind, we went on the moon 50 plus years, or 40 years ago, 44,
Yeah.
45 years
Yeah.
ago. So, and that does not mean, I mean, I'm not going to I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist here,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean we haven't been back either. I mean, we were there, 5 times, 6 times? I mean, we were to the moon quite a bit. And it doesn't mean that we've just...
Yeah, but once again, we've got to take our final break. But once again, Russia was there first. And people remember the people who've done it first. Nobody remembers who came in second, third, or fourth. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And if you'd like to find out more about Evan's organization, it's www. X-Zone Nation, Evan Pedone is our special guest. He is with the Florida Paranormal Society that is based in Tampa, Florida. Their website is floridaparanormalsociety.com, and Evan is the author of Expedition Everest, which is available on Amazon.com. Evan, don't take me wrong. I understand the importance and the significance of having the first man on the moon, and it took a lot of thought, it took a lot of hard work and dedication, as well as bravery of those who were involved in the space program. I'm not taking that away from the United States at all. It's just that 50 years or 51 years or 52 years later, it seems that the focus has gone away from the moon. Everybody's complaining about energy. And yet when we know for a fact that the element helium-3 is on the moon, it's in plenty supply on the moon, and the only situation is how do we get it, either refine it on the moon or bring it back so that we can take the noose off the neck of the energy crisis system. To me, this would be more important than going to Mars or some of the other aspects that the government is getting into. And just to say that, how do we know we're not going back to the moon, or going back and surveying the moon and getting ready to mine this product? Wouldn't it be to NASA's advantage, or the government's advantage, or the private sector, that if they were doing this in order to get more funding, that they would say, listen, this is what we're doing. This is why we need more money. We want to be competitive. We know that China, Japan, and India are up there planning to take this natural resource and bring it back. We want your money. We want your support. We want America to be there first. Doesn't that make sense? But nobody's doing it.
Well, it definitely makes sense, and I think that the United States can definitely, perhaps, be, when it comes to their strategic versus what is public knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's definitely a gap. Number one. Number two, I think that that's part of the problem too. Is that you have a space command and you have an Air Force that is actively involved with space, yet you don't know anything what they do. I'm sure you're familiar with the space plane that goes up and was up there for over a year,
mm-hmm.
and no one knew what its mission was.
But do we need to know this? Do we need to know this? Does the public really need to know?
Well, I think that's part of the problem, though, is because if they don't know what we're doing in space.
But if
And
the
yet
public
NASA
knows, but if the public knows,
NASA
so do the enemies of the United States.
Yeah. So and the thing is that that's a point, is the enemies of the United States don't know what we're doing in space either. But on the same token, people are like, well, why aren't we, like you just brought up a valid point, why aren't we going to the moon? Why aren't we doing this stuff with Helium-3? And and that would be something that would be public knowledge through NASA. So what my statement is that I'm not going to say that we're not going to the moon. What I'm saying is that NASA is not going to the moon. And I think that there's a disconnect between strategic and what we do with Space Command and the Air Force versus which is classified, or is top secret, is
Right.
not being released to the public. Versus what NASA is doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have space planes. I mean, the Aurora is a real aircraft.
Yeah. Evan, we unfortunately, we've run out of time for tonight. I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great hour talking to you. My very best to all the members of the Florida Paranormal Society, and I look forward to the next time you join us back here in the X Zone. Until then, my friend, take care of yourself, and regards from Canada.
Thank you very much from Florida, and thank you for having me on your show.
All right, take care. I'll send you down some snow. Exo Nation, Ed Pedone has been our guest this hour, www.floridaparanormalsociety.com, and Evan is the author of Expedition Everest, which is available on Amazon.com. I'll be back on the other side of the news. Don't go away.